Lately, I've been kind of fascinated with the I give up genre of videos, such as the video about how the Japanese are becoming a low desire society, videos about millennials giving up, Gen Z giving up, quiet quitting, bed rotting. It's like a global trend across multiple generations to just be, to some degree, checking out of life and society. The thing all of these trends have in common is people just checking out of a system that feels like it's exploiting us, that is cruel and hollow, and everywhere people are just withdrawing from it or dragging themselves through it to a minimal degree. After consuming a number of these videos, a part of it feels very bleak and dystopian and hopeless, reflective of a society that doesn't know how to socialize or talk to each other anymore, doesn't know how to build community, lonely people staring at our phones. On the other hand, there's this great draw and appeal to me of the whole just quitting, low desire society, because in some ways it feels like a protest. It feels like in a world where it's very hard to unionize, we don't have the same kind of jobs, and there's a lot of laws and just structure that prevents us from unionizing. Like, I'm just kind of a freelance artsy person. Everything I've done has just been self-employed, but my income is always dependent on one of the large sites like Amazon, eBay, YouTube. So obviously I can't unionize. There's a lot of people in my kind of position where their income is dependent on Amazon or Uber or what have you. And a lot of parts of the United States have laws that make it very hard to unionize anymore. Therefore, in some ways, I see this, just the quiet quitting and the showing up to work and just putting in minimal effort in a way is kind of a rebellion against a lack of protections, a lack of valuing the laboring part of our society. Like, if no one values your work, then why should you give extra? There needs to be a reason. Every job I've had where I did work for a big company directly as an employee, except for my job at the little bookstore working for one guy, but I worked for a couple of, larger companies in retail, and I gave every day like 125%. And for all that effort, I got mocked at a morning meeting because they didn't feel like I had enough of a sales personality. I didn't get a raise for the first 2 years that I worked at a department store, and when I did, it was 25 cents. We had managers that were just incredibly hostile to us on a daily basis. What was the motivation for me to put that much effort into my job? For the customers? Because the customers are also very mean. The customers at this department store where I worked were just like horrible people. But I had been raised, to work hard, so I did. And after I started working for myself and I look back, I kind of wondered, like, why did I give so much of myself to this job that gave me absolutely nothing in return? No raise, no praise, no respect. I was getting berated for just stupid stuff, like on a weekly basis. Like, I can still remember this one time, and the lights would shut off automatically at a certain hour in the store. It wasn't under our control. And one time the lights had shut off and it was dark. All of us on the closing staff, our manager walked us around the store to see if our closing was like acceptable and if we could go home. And this was like any other day, we'd done our best, but it was customers gonna be customers, and this guy just decided he wanted to like go on a power trip on this particular day, and he kept us 30 minutes past closing, and then the lights go out. He's still walking us around. He finds a shirt underneath like a rack. Like, you can't even see it walking by, but he's like really looking, and he like pulls it out and holds it up to us like, you guys missed this. Like, come on. That kind of stuff happened all the time. But meanwhile, I worked directly under this older lady who was about to retire with the company. And like, she got paid a really good hourly wage because she'd been grandmothered in, and she was always telling me how much better it used to be working there and how it used to feel like a real job where you were treated with some level of respect. And of course, as we know, the price of all the basic stuff of life has gone up way more than wages. So I totally get why people just feel defeated. But on the brighter side of this, I've been feeling a lot of that sense of just kind of checking out on, that whole work to consume kind of treadmill life. And it doesn't feel bad. It feels good, actually. It feels like I am resetting my priorities to something that is more centered around the soul, humanity. Like, it feels like pulling the curtain back and exposing consumerism as just nonsense. I don't need very much to be happy. I need almost nothing to be happy. Once the basics of food and shelter and clean water and cats are covered, not very much makes me happy compared to just having time to pursue my creativity. And I see in a lot of these videos there is an aspect of that people are rediscovering the joy and simplicity in spending more time creating, or even just enjoying yourself. And also those things that are not like paid labor per se, but are just very satisfying and feel like you're connecting, like cooking and baking and gardening, stuff like that. And for most of my adult life, I have been very work focused. I am somebody who works really hard, is very disciplined, takes my work very seriously, doesn't have much of a life outside of work. I've chosen unconventional work, but within the parameters of the creative work I've been doing, I have definitely treated it like a business and worked very long hours. If you follow this channel regularly, you kind of know my deal. But if you're new here, I have been a fantasy author since I was in my 20s. I sold my first book when I was 26 to Bloomsbury, and I've pretty much been making my living as a writer ever since, which has been great. But it has also meant putting aside the works that really, really mattered to me when I was young, the things that brought me like the most joy, and learning to write to conform to what was like the hottest thing that was going to sell the best. And also, of course, learning all about like marketing myself and, there's a lot of social media, networking, all that side of things that comes into play. And I've very much been involved in a lot of that. When I was traditionally published, I did a lot of networking. I had a ton of author friends. I had many critique partners. I was blogging. I was connecting with book bloggers. I was very much like in the mix that you kind of need to be in. Well, you don't have to, but I got some things out of it, like just information from other writers, blurbs from other writers. It does help if you're like in the network and if you can connect with book bloggers, stuff like that. Then when I moved to India, it got even more intense, like learning marketing, learning paid ads, all that kind of thing. But in the last couple of years, it's not like I'm not doing any of that. Of course I am. And this YouTube channel has kind of become my main gig for the last couple of years. And the main reason for that is, at my core, I just really want to write my weird little stuff. Do you remember when you were a kid and you would have a day, just a free day, and you'd have an idea for some kind of project? For me, I was unschooled, so I had a lot of these free days where I would come up with some project, and that would occupy my entire universe. A lot of times it was writing or drawing or playing pretend games with my sister, all rotating around our shared fantasy world. Other times it would be like developing my own board game or card game system, or it would be making a metropolis out of all of our blocks and Legos and then having our cats play in it. And, we made a video of the cats playing in the city. We were always doing these really involved projects that had no purpose, but it was so absorbing and satisfying. There was no need for a purpose. You're a kid. You're just lost in, I have this idea and I'm going to see it through. And it was from those kind of days that my fantasy world that I'm still writing about to this day was born. Of course, it was in very rudimentary form, but from the very beginning, it was just like so deeply satisfying. I would be so absorbed in it and lost in it and so happy to be there. It was just pure joy. When life would be stressful, which it often was, I was a very anxiety-ridden kid. My fantasy world was always a place that was just joyful and satisfying on this deep level. It was both emotionally and intellectually satisfying and spiritually satisfying. On every level that really matters, it was very satisfying. But in adulthood, it's very rare to feel that way because it feels like everything needs to be monetized. Everything needs to be optimized. So over the years, I started to feel a lot of guilt for working on things that was not going to be in any way productive or financially viable. And I've realized in the last year especially, I'm having a lot of those days where I feel like a kid again. Like I'm just doing things that don't have any reason. Like I'll wake up, I have work I need to do, and I'll kind of look at it and go, yeah, I'm going to get to it. But then I'll have a whim to draw something, to see this whole sketch through and color it in and everything. And instead of doing the work I'm supposed to be doing, I'll just do that. Or I'll be writing my book. I'll get very lost in it. The books I'm writing now, they're not making a lot of money. I know if they ever do make money, it's going to take time. It's just that kind of series that is not going to hit it out of the gate, which means that you have to be committed to weathering some years of building up the catalog and marketing it in this slow drip kind of way just to see if it could hit. So I'm in that phase now of just like, okay, if I really buckle down on getting out a good back catalog with my fantasy world and marketing it, could I get to that point where it starts to catch on? I don't know, but I just have to put the work in anyway. But the thing is, it's just been so satisfying and so fun, and that sense of just being completely transported that I used to feel all the time as a kid and haven't really felt for decades. And it's so addictive and so what I need right now. And I'm realizing that my sense of like what I need has shifted drastically over these last few years, because for the longest time, if you asked me, what do you need? I would say like, well, I need money. So lately, it feels like what I really need is just to feed my soul. And as long as I can pay the bills, good enough. Objectively, my little Capricorn brain kicks in frequently and thinks, well, you really need to be making more money than just to pay the bills. You're in your 40s. You really need to be saving for retirement. And at some point I'm going to have to get a new car, dental work. Like there's more expenses that pop up the older you get that you really need extra income for. But on just like a deep motivation level, I'm struggling to care. I've been ambitious and responsible for so long, and I know how it feels to care about that stuff. But lately I just don't. I feel like I am living in the low desire society where I don't really want to spend money. I don't really want to go anywhere. I don't want to travel. I don't want to do anything. I mean, occasionally I do get a hair. I would like to have coffee with a writer friend a little more often, but it's not a big motivator for me right now. I'm like just so deep in my fantasy world. It feels like this is the time for me to be doing this. So this has been a huge mental shift for me. And on like an intellectual level, I grapple with it a lot. Like sometimes I try to like kickstart that sense of ambition and do more stuff that will make money, but it keeps fizzling out. Like I'm just struggling with it. I'm just struggling to care. And I think there's a combination of factors going on that is affecting me and probably a lot of other people at the same time. Of course, there's the hormonal component. I'm 44, which seems so weird to me still. Obviously, my hormones are changing as I'm getting out of my fertility years. Still quite a ways away from actual menopause, I'm sure, but definitely perimenopausal. I've been very blindsided by perimenopause, but one of the symptoms that seems pretty common is just not caring. Some of you may have even seen the I don't care club lady on social media.
We do not care if we are sleeping next to a pile of clean clothes. They will get folded when our mental health is better.
And I always thought that when you got to this age, you'd become like sassy, like you wouldn't care what other people thought of you. And that has not been true. Like, I have not acquired any additional bitchiness, I guess. But the one thing I don't care about is just like doing things that I probably should be doing, like being responsible. I just like don't care about that part. I guess I'm feeling very selfish in the sense that like I just want to make my weird little stuff. But the fact that this mood has also been hitting millennials that are, I'm an old millennial, almost a Gen Xer. So there's a lot of younger millennials that aren't there yet. But I still see videos about millennials not caring. Of course, Gen Z, the youths have always been accused of being kind of lazy and apathetic. And that, I mean, Gen Xers were known as the slacker generation. So this is not in any way new. Young people never really want to join the workforce and work really hard. But I do think that Gen Z as a whole probably has even less optimism and motivation than millennials had, depending on your age. And of course, the fact that this is also happening in other countries that have completely different like situations, but everyone to a certain extent is dealing with some global conditions. There's a lot of global upheaval. There's a lot of sense to me that the people in charge blatantly do not care about the average person. We've all seen like tech billionaires saying crazy stuff about regular people that like they just want us to slave away for them, or even in some cases go extinct. In other cases, to have more babies for them to use. They can't even decide what they want us for, but they just want us to be working for them. Not happy. They don't care. The Gilded Age is back, but worse. You can't really imagine anybody building the Carnegie libraries these days. Can you imagine a tech billionaire being like, I'm going to build libraries for like a bunch of cities in America so that people can like learn? Can you imagine? The days of feeling like that kind of benevolence was going to happen is definitely over. And the way politicians and also the media talk about regular people. I just saw something the other day where they were talking about consumers. You know, you hear the word consumers a lot. And consumers is basically just a way of saying people, really. They're not thinking that there are people that are not consumers. We all have to consume something. But consumers is just another way of saying the masses that serve the rich people by using the wages they are paid to buy more stuff. And if the consumers aren't happy, if the consumers aren't behaving, you'll see those articles are like, consumers are choosing to hold on to their tech devices for too long and it's hurting the industry. Boo-hoo. So then they try to find ways to make our devices obsolete so that we feel like we have to buy another one when we don't even want one, just because, you know, they're ruining it. So there's a lot of stress politically, societally, but at the same time, it's a weird time because, like, if I never got on the internet and I never turned on the news, I wouldn't be aware of a lot of the things that are stressing me out. It's not like the Great Depression and World War II, for example, where, like, you know, you knew those things were going on. I mean, depending on your class, not everyone was deeply affected by the Great Depression, but even a lot of fairly well-to-do people got affected pretty badly. And of course, World War II, you know, you knew if people were like off fighting a war, there were rations. There's nothing really going on that would necessarily affect you if you had decent financial circumstances in place already and you didn't follow any news. So that's a weird situation. Because I think if I just turned all of this off completely and I didn't talk to anyone else who consumed media either, everything would mostly seem pretty fine. I'd be like, ground beef's gotten really expensive. That's like the main, there's not a lot that would really jump out at me. But that is not the world we live in. We live in a world where where pretty much most of us are constantly assaulted with awareness of what the whole world is doing to a degree that's like so unprecedented. Like 50 years ago, I would have known there was a war going on between Russia and Ukraine. But in the present day, not only do I know that, but I get comments from Ukrainians on this channel now and then telling me their experiences and relating them to things I'm talking about in my video, like, well, here in Ukraine, we're coping with this in this way, and this has been hard because of this. So it's like a very personal interaction where like I'm actually hearing from someone who's living through this. And then it becomes like constantly very real to me and so much more visceral and upsetting when you think about this going on, and you can put like a real interaction, apply that to the news, and feel so helpless about things that are going on. And it's not even just like, you know, those big kind of events. It's even the fact that if I open Reddit just to like, oh, what's going on? Pretty much every day I'll see a post on like one of the cat Reddits of like, we lost our baby today. You know, like just I'll see somebody's cat died, somebody I don't even know, and then I'll be sad about their cat. Whereas in the 90s, I would not have known this random stranger's cat. I was not aware of any cats dying outside of the cats of people I personally knew, but now I get to hear somebody's little story about their cat all the time, and I get sad about it. So I think that this is just a barrage on our senses, and it's no wonder that people just want to kind of shut down and lose some level of hope or desire. I kind of feel like not only have I been grappling with like consumerism and like my sense of like desire for things on a more practical level, like does this expenditure really benefit me? Do I want to deal with the space this takes up? Stuff like that. But there's also a sense that there's so much out there to be had at any moment, and yet also there are so many bigger things going on. And I think that my brain to a certain degree just kind of goes, no. You can kind of purchase your way into happiness for a little while, and some people do it forever. But for me, it started to feel increasingly hollow. And honestly, I think even people who are addicted to it do kind of realize that it is somewhat of a hollow thing. It's not like real happiness. But if my joy comes from creating my weird little stuff, then that becomes something much more untouchable. In theory, the only thing that could keep me from my little world and the spark of creation, the dreaming, the ideas, the letting characters ramble in my head and thinking about where their stories are going to go, like that spark of creation, nothing can take that from me except my death, the degradation of my brain, or if I allow the world to take it from me. That becomes a very empowering thought in a world that feels like it's barraging me and stressing me out. And I think that's one reason I want to retreat into this protected thought. When I worked at my crappy retail job, I was in my late teens, early 20s while I was there. And it was before I was pursuing my career as a writer and writing to market. So it was when I was still very in touch with that childlike sense of connecting to my fantasy world and letting ideas unspool from my brain just for me. And there were so many days when I would have some boring job I was supposed to be doing, and I would be doing it, but my mind would wander somewhere else. And we had like music piped in, like pop music. A lot of times it was on a classic rock station, and I'm a classic rock kind of girl, especially like the artsier stuff. There was a good range on this channel. So if a song came on that was like kind of connected in some way to a character or something, that would really get me going. And I could just mentally transport myself far, far away from this job I was doing. And I would be letting myself think of all these ideas that I could write when I got home or on my days off. And so even while I was dealing with these managers that treated me like absolute crap, I was still untouchable to a degree. I think it helped me weather a lot of that stuff because my fantasy world felt more real and important than my stupid managers did. That was like the real stuff of life. It was like a spiritual core for me. Something that I could just always go back to that would give me strength. And that isn't to say that I think people should completely check out and not care about other people or the world or what's going on. I do care quite a lot, sometimes very painfully so. And I try to do actionable things to make the world a better place. It never feels like enough, but I do keep it in mind. Like, what can I do to give back to the world? I don't want to just be insular. But I also think that, like, protecting that part of myself is so, so important. Just like when I worked in my retail job, and that ability to lose myself in those dreams and the joy of creating them gave me so much strength. That is still true today. And I'm so happy that I've been reconnecting with that lately. It's like having an old best friend that you haven't talked to in 20 years because you moved away and you moved back to your hometown, or they moved where you are, like you've reconnected with this person that was your best friend, and it's like no time has passed and you just remember how great it was, how great it is to have a relationship that gives you that kind of joy and strength. That's kind of how reconnecting with my fantasy world has been for me lately. It just feels like this thing that nourishes me and makes me so happy. I don't want to think about everything else all the time. I want to have that time to just play around and just have fun. And I really wonder sometimes, like, I can't really regret my life choices because I did have some years where I did really well, and I gained a lot of good experience, but sometimes I wonder what would have happened if, when I wrote the Cursed Soul trilogy, which was set in my world 10 years ago, and then I wrote another book set there, it didn't really do very well, so I just gave up on the whole thing. And sometimes I wonder, like, what if I had stuck with it then and just kept writing it for these past 10 years instead of doing all this other stuff? Like, what would have happened? Could I have had even more time with this? So whatever it is that brings you that kind of joy and nourishment, if you have anything like that in your life, try to find a way to hold on to it and don't feel ashamed about it. I guess that's what I'm trying to say. Don't feel like it's a waste of time or unproductive. I think it's so important. It's the thing that drives me to face a world that can be difficult and to keep going. It's just my weird little stuff, but it is also the thing that gives me the fortitude, the joy, the purpose to keep going on days when I'm just really stressed out. So yeah, those are my random thoughts for today. I hope they were helpful. If you have any thoughts about this topic, I would love to hear them. If you'd like more from me, I have a Substack where I post weekly little chatty updates. That's free for everybody. I also have a paid tier of Substack, Patreon, and YouTube memberships where you get 2 bonus videos a month voted on by you guys. And if you'd like to read any of my books, there's a link in the description. I always recommend my Hidden Lands books first because they are the ones that keep me going. I post every Sunday and sometimes on Wednesdays, and I thank you so much for watching. So much for all your support, and I will see you next time. Bye!